So the topic is business after lockdown, the way forward. And I've tried to put together random thoughts, starting from what it is on the global level, coming down, and probably end with some things which I think are going to be relevant for all of us who work in this part of the world. When you go to the next slide, you will actually see something over the last 7 decades. Okay, the world has actually faced only 6 major recessions during that period. Okay, up to 2020. And if you look at the previous 6 recessions, all of them were caused by human factors. Whereas this time it is caused by a virus. Something, if you weigh the entire thing will probably be not more than a couple of grams, whatever is there around the world. So it's something which, and the sad part is that we never knew about it before. We also don't have a vaccine for that. When you look at this graph, you will actually see how one has come out of the recession and the period that it has taken to come out of a recession. So you will really find that the possibility, and it's a very strong possibility, that you will see a V-shaped recovery. Unless this continues for a long time, in which case it will probably be a U-shaped one. I hope it doesn't become L-shaped, which could be a disaster. All right, so I think it's a V-shape that we should all be looking forward to. And to some extent, or to a great extent, it's all in our hands on how this recovery happens. So don't worry about what happens around the world. Look at what you can do for yourselves and look at what you can do for your businesses, and that is something which I hope to cover. So when you look at this graph, you see that the IMF actually has projected that there will be a negative growth of about 3%. They've also projected that next year it's going to be 5%. If it's going to be a 5%, then it definitely will have to be a V. So that is where I look at it and say that's what's going to happen. My next slide actually looks at, it talks about the kind of impact that various recessions have had for us. Each of recession has left a lasting impact. In 2001, that's when the 9/11 also happened. Immediately after that, and the dot-com burst also at that point of time, the big change was the airport screening that was happening. The way you walked through an airport completely changed. But remember, there was so much of business generated because of that. How many people thought that the 9/11 and the kind of changes at that time would generate so much of business? And how much of those have any of us captured? So very clearly, there is a lot of change that happened with the airport screening. Before that, it was much easier for us. 2001 also actually was a tipping point for the Chinese economy. Substantial growth over the last 2 decades by China. All right. I think this recession is also going to be a tipping point for China, but I think it is going to be in the opposite direction. So this is what I think is going to happen, because very clearly there is a move for many companies wanting to move out of China. It is going to impact their economy and there will be a problem there. The 2008 recession, which was caused by the banks and the financial sector completely, that actually brought about regulation in the banking sector. All the regulation which came, without the regulation, people would be very wary about the banks. That has changed. But banks, the regulation came out in 2008 across the world, including in India. A lot of things happened at that point of time. 1998 which was probably the end of the Japanese miracle. Okay, the late 90s saw the dominance that the Japanese had moving elsewhere. 1973, actually we saw the oil thing happen. How the oil producing countries suddenly started becoming very powerful. So the early 70s, end of the 70s was that time, and that continued till now. So a lot of those are going to change. I wouldn't be surprised if you will see an upward trend in the Japanese investments, which they will make across the globe and actually help them to come back to the kind of dominance that they had in the past. So one thing is very clear, each recession has set in a change in the habits as the recession tightens its grip. So you will see a lot of change that is happening even during this recession. Also, the kind of consumer habits will change. And that is going to be a big change that is there. In fact, a quick study which was done with about 1,000 people in the US actually saw that over a quarter of them have made changes in their shopping habits. Why don't you look at each one of us, if we look at it and see how have we changed our spending habits during the last 2 months? How long is it going to take for you to go back to the same spending habits that you had before that? So very clearly, these are the big changes that are there. So similarly, you will find that there's going to be a shift in attitude. There's going to be a reconsideration of what is of value. The value that each of us look at it. You may find that big brands will find it very difficult because people may not see the value in that because they're not really, that has gone. Okay, and that is something which is very, very important. So the value which they see, you will not find that happening. You will also find that there will be a lot of adjustments in the purchase behavior of individuals. So this is something which anyone who is looking at a business to consumer model needs to be looking at clearly to see what is happening there. So you're going to find consumer attitudes and behavior will change in the recession and will persist even when it ends. The next slide is something which all of us will see in our offices, in our homes, okay? And even this recession and the lockdown will create long-lasting changes in the way we work, the way we eat, the way we travel, the way we stay, the way we consume, what we buy, what we sell, how we interact with each other, how we celebrate events, okay? How we look at things like marriages, funerals, all those have changed. How we do banking. Most important, how do we live? Okay, the way we live is going to completely change post-recession. Now, from a business point of view, you need to know how people live to see how you can find out and get to where they're going to spend their money. So this is something which is very important. And what is the new normal going to be for business is a big question that is there. First, there will be a lot more government intervention. I'm sure that that is going to happen. You will see a lot more government intervention. And therefore, greater scrutiny of business, I think, will happen. Because governments around the world actually are pumping in trillions of dollars into their economies directly, and have also cut interest rates and applied other forms of monetary stimulus. So you're going to find that government is doing all this and they will want to be sure that it is going to have an impact. So you will find a lot of government intervention happening. As governments step up to serve or save the private sector, the means they choose will differ. It will change from country to country. And you are seeing that happen. Somewhere it is money coming directly to the accounts. Somewhere it is certain sectors which are being revived. So you're going to see that happen. But in some other places, I wouldn't think it's going to be unexpected, but you may see certain nationalization happening in some countries. You may see certain sectors which may get nationalized. Some of the countries, they will take equity stakes to revive the companies. They will also look at providing loans. Others will choose to regulate. It all depends on the way and the kind of governments that are there. How much, how fast, and in what ways governments eventually reduce their economic role will be some of the most important questions of the next decade. Because the impact of this is not going to get over tomorrow. It is going to last and last for at least a decade to come. Not in terms of the business going down, but because there is so much of money which government will be pumping in, they will want to see how they can get it back. So you're going to see. With many business likely to be operating to some extent with public money, the public will expect and indeed demand that their money be used for the benefit of the society at large. You're going to see something which one would today call conscious capitalism happening around, okay? Including a lot of business will talk about conscious capitalism. The world will see the rise of a contact-free economy. And the three big areas are going to be digital commerce, telemedicine, and a lot of automation. The COVID-19 pandemic could prove to be a decisive turning point. So very clearly, this is going to be a decisive turning point for all of us. And in terms of e-commerce, the pandemic has accelerated a change in shopping habits that was already well established. You also see that the figures on telemedicine are just striking, okay? Teladoc Health, the largest independent US telemedicine service, actually has thousands of doctors being added on to their network. You have a Swedish firm called CareY International, They're one of the biggest telehealth providers in Europe. They had a 200% increase in registrations. There are a few companies out of Kerala who do very similar work, but they have actually gone ahead and said a lot of the services are free during this time, but they are going to benefit from that. And, one of them did work in Calicut with the collector, and you're going to see some of them really come up. So you're going to see a big change in the way medicine is practiced. In fact, they believe that by 2030, 400 million to 800 million jobs would be impacted because of automation. This was a study done in 2017. What has COVID-19 done? It has probably speeded this up. Whatever is going to happen is being speeded up. The effect is becoming possible to imagine a world of business where the factory to the shop floor, you're going to find human contact is minimized. About 2 years ago when I visited China, the new Jaguar engine factory in China, near Shanghai, actually employs less than 100 people. And many of you would have heard the joke that the modern factory will actually have a watchman and a dog. The watchman to ensure nobody comes, and the dog to ensure that the watchman doesn't touch anything. So that is the kind of big changes that you're going to see in robotics that is going to happen. And countries like China have already been working in that in a big way. In effect, it's becoming impossible, to do business without the kind of changes that are going to happen. So these are things which I think are going to happen. Similarly, you're going to find hospitals will offer both telemedicine and clinic visits. So the number of visitors coming to the hospital may come down, but hospitals will not lose business. Hospital is one sector which definitely will do well. So it is necessary for every business to actually rethink their strategy and plan to take all these into account, the changes that are happening. How do I capitalize? How do I gain from what has happened in this crisis? Purely ethical. I'm not talking of unhealthy gain, but very clearly, how do I look at it from my business point of view? How am I going to get into a completely new area of business which is going to happen? When you go to the next slide, actually the implication is that companies will have to completely rethink. It is not enough to tweak the business model. You have to rethink the business model. For example, supply chains built on just-in-time inventory and distributed component sourcing may actually have to be reconsidered, given the way many things have been disrupted now. Companies will actually have to build or strengthen backup and safety plans, be it deeper layers of succession planning or significantly expanding work-at-home capabilities for more employees. Investors are likely to take note to devise these ways to incorporate new resilience in the way they value organizations, just like they did with climate-related risks that were there in the past. So you're going to find that many companies will need to rebalance their priorities, making additional resilience measures as important to their strategic thinking as cost and efficiency. One thing is very clear. Earlier they used to talk of a business continuity plan. They used to talk about how do you look at disaster recovery when you talk to IT companies. Today they're going to talk about how do you handle a crisis like this. What is your business as usual plan going to be? Okay, your business continuity plan, how is that going to work? And nobody ever thought of including a virus attack on something like that, which would not, earlier they used to say one geography to the other, as long as you're in different geography, there is no problem. Today, that's not going to be how they're going to ask you, how are you going to manage a crisis like this? So this is going to be one of the things when companies look at large contracts being outsourced to people. So what is going to happen, and I believe that, it's a very old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Actually, the pandemic could bring positive outcomes on individuals, communities, business, and governments. And all of us are learning new ways to connect. Businesses are finding faster, cheaper ways to operate. Remote working has soared. These changes could make for better management and more flexible workforces. You actually will see that the connect is happening. However, there is one thing, the social connect which happens due to personal contact is not there. So you will reduce those, you will have a reduction there. But overall, you will find that the need to travel for important conferences coming down. If you're going to tell a most important client saying that, I will find a way to come to you tomorrow, the client is going to say, no, please don't come, let's have a call and finish it off. Because nobody wants to risk the kind of situation that we are all in. So nurturing the next normal, that will be better than what it replaced, will be a long-term test for all institutions. That means you have to look at what is the next normal. It will have to be much better than what we have earlier. And you're going to find that that's what all institutions, global and local, public and private. For all of us, instead of looking at the past, it'll be critical for us to reconstruct for the future. So it's not enough to tinker with what you're doing. Like I told earlier, not enough to tweak. It is necessary to actually rethink and reconstruct for the future. If you go to the next slide, actually, it is something which is very clear. The sailing is not going to be easy in the coming days. And even the best of breed will be challenged. Okay, there are very few organizations who have not been impacted by this. Several companies without cash in hand will be forced to shut down. Actually, in these times, the most important thing is preserving cash. Companies, especially small and medium ones, will be forced to plan for at least 9 months, of expenses, thus bringing down their expenses. So very clearly, you will need to plan for 9 to 12 months of cash flow, and without which you're going to be taking too much of a risk. Many jobs will be lost depending on the priority of individual companies and the clients and the businesses that they are in. People will be asked to take salary cuts ranging from 20% to 50%, and many may be asked to go on leave without pay. This is something which is going to happen in spite of the government of India or government of Kerala or all these law rules or talks that are there. It is impossible. How will somebody pay when they don't have money to survive? So you're going to find that those changes are going to happen. But actually, tough times do not last. Tough companies are the ones who last. And as Albert Einstein once pointed out, in the middle of adversity, there is a great opportunity. In the middle of every adversity, there is a great opportunity. And I think if we look at that, and each of us in our businesses follow that, you're going to see that the change is going to be tremendous. The next slide is a very interesting one. We were on an emergency mode, completely power off. As a first step, we just need to restart. And when you restart, you're actually restarting from the beginning. It is important to take this step immediately. Do not hesitate, because always you want to start from where you ended. I would say it is better to restart. And I'm sure that this simple step will pave the way for the future. The next one is a bit of a busy slide, but so the businesses will have to reimagine their business, their operating models, and increase digital adoption. Digital adoption to succeed in the new normal. Digital adoption is going to be very important, but you're going to find digital adoption being the new normal. For example, the digital adoption in the education sector was very low. Everyone talked of smart classrooms, but a smart classroom was a projector and a screen. That's going to change. You've seen the kind of change that has happened with online courses and Zoom classes, even from small schools. So this is something which is happening to our schools now. You're going to find a lot. I was very surprised when the Chief Minister at one of his conferences said that we have to look at MOOC, massive online courses that are available from the best universities around the world. Why don't you all spend your time looking at it? And 2 years ago, the then Minister for Higher Education said, MOOC is not relevant. We will only learn what our professors in colleges teach. And I don't want MOOC to be looked at by any of the students. So the changes are there. It's changing everywhere. And I think that is a big impact that is going to happen. The travel sector will change. We all believe, many of us think it's disaster. It is not. Okay, the airlines have gone through a very similar period in the past, but not all of them together like this. Hotels have never gone through like this. There are countries where it has happened, but not globally. But I'm sure it will pick up, and they will have to find new models by which they are able to survive. You will find that they may focus on only domestic travel. You may find that they will look at selling future packages. You might probably get good deals for a travel, for a 2-week package to Africa, coming up at half the cost of what it was earlier, because people will want to be selling for the future so that they are able to make some money now. So you will find people coming out with this thing. And at that point of time, they will actually come back to you and say, this package is there. It's great. This is what you get. But I can actually upgrade your room for this so much more. Or I can provide you with this kind of a private vehicle for so. So they will look at value-added services which come up at that point of time. So it is not that travel and tour have completely gone off, but you will find that they will need to receive. The next slide actually is something which we are all talking about. You know, as India and other nations will focus on becoming more self-sufficient and moving away from current manufacturing powerhouses, each nation will focus on building products and services more indigenously and sourcing from countries like us, like India, which will create an increase in the demand for Indian companies and their products and services. I'm sure this is going to happen because they need to look at an alternative. Of course, Vietnam is there, Thailand is there. Definitely India is going to get a good chunk of that. How much of that will come to Kerala is something which we will all need to decide together. Even more, the politicians and political parties and government will need to make a call, because people, you know, you've already seen several state governments have changed the way their labor laws are going to be implemented. So people are going to be looking at all this, and people are not going to come to Kerala because they love Kerala. They're going to come here because it makes business sense for them. So those are things which we will need to look at. And that is what is going to make a big change there. So Indian companies will have to be prepared for the same and actually look at countries like China and Japan to learn from creating the right economy for the industry. So this is something which we will need to see happen. My next one is a very common one which we talk, you know, a lot of you talk about these. You know, clearly the gig economy, which looked wonderful, is going to have a bit of a problem, because a lot of people who work in the gig economy were people who were working in the traditional economy also. But today, with a lot of job losses and a lot of changes that are going to happen, you will find that the gig economy will actually be a solution for many of them who lose jobs today. Okay, whether they be in the IT sector or anything in design, could be young architects, a lot of them will get into this gig economy of sharing, and actually that will help them to survive in these times. About 90% of India's workforce is informally employed, including what we would call the gig economy workers. This population is extremely vulnerable to economic shocks like has happened today, and will need greater access to formal credit, societal safety nets, such as insurance and pension schemes. So we need to see what can be done for them, and we will need to design things for people in the gig economy. And that is something which is going to be more important. And as the economy stands still, you know, the cogs of the economy stand still move due to the lockdown, you're going to find that you know, the short-term implications such as job losses, disruption of supply chains and things like that happening, will happen, but I think it will come back. I mean, I expect that, you know, we may lose about 20,000 plus jobs in Kerala, in the IT sector alone, all right? But I'm sure that over 75% of them will actually get jobs within 6 to 18 months. They will all come back. In the long term, you're going to find that if we manage this crisis well, there is a chance of opening up opportunities to revamp the Indian economy, as well as to reshape our workspaces and the norms that we follow. It will, however, require major restructuring of governmental framework and also the education sector. I believe that if we don't use this opportunity to drive radical changes, it is our loss. Work from home has provided continuity, but we will have to see if it will provide productivity in future. Today it is happening, but it need not happen there. It is exposed to a class system for sure, which means certain people will be able to do it, some people will not be able to do it. Employees will start evaluating employers for resilience. So people are not going to look at what I'm going to pay. They're going to look at, will this company survive another crisis? And they're going to be looking at job security as they go forward. So that is something which is very important. And you will find that this resilience will become an evaluation of employers for the performance that they're going in for. At some stage, both government and private sector will have to think about the gig workers and find a way to let them flourish independently, and also give them some form of social security, which I mentioned about earlier. It is necessary to think outside of the box. Also, companies will have to start thinking outside the box to sustain and then increase their business. For example, Domino's today have started delivering essential items through its mobile app, not just pizza. Earlier, if you ask them for anything else, no. But today, they will supply essentials for you. You're going to find people choose trust over control in navigating the new normal of work, even within your organization. When your people work from home today, you are trusting them. So it's going to be trust over the control that you have. You have no control over the guy. You're trusting them, and that is why. So you're going to find that trust over control is going to be the new normal in the work that we are. Employers need to grasp the fact that people are creative and productive before 9 o'clock in the morning and after 5 in the evening. All right. So you will need to see how you are going to work that. Productivity for knowledge workers is not measured in time, but in idea generation, in terms of relationship enhancement and competitive disruption that is there. Moreover, an increasingly global workspace actually will require us to adopt to different time zones, which we are already doing today, but that's going to be more important. So contrary to the traditional management thinking, if you offer flexible schedules, you open up more options for innovation, communication, creativity, productivity, engagement. And I think it's going to be about managing people's energy and not time. In fact, I remember during my days at CDAC, we had a very bright guy with us, but that guy would leave the office at 8 o'clock in the morning when we were all coming in, and he would leave the office and he would come back to office when we were all leaving. He just couldn't work with people around, but he was a very bright guy. So you will need to look at a lot of those happening. And you will see that, the kind of changes that are happening. Look at the small stores today. They are actually taking orders by WhatsApp, and they are packing it and keeping for you to pick up, or they will deliver it to your home. They're using Paytm. Hence, thinking outside the box is going to be essential for every business that is there. Next slide, please. India can take on a bigger role, not just for indigenization, but also for becoming a big global power in the manufacturing field. A lot bigger than it had ever been in the last 30 years. It is a unique opportunity, and we need to repurpose ourselves to some extent to be able to do that. And there, not just the government of India, but it's going to be important for individual state governments to look at changes in the way they allow people to do business. And I think the most important thing in this is going to be the freedom to do business. The platforms have taken a weight out of society's need for information, okay? So this is something, they have taken the weight of society's need for information to stay connected in work, in operating business, and to stay entertained. So you really look at most of the successful businesses today, they are actually running on platforms, whether it is Uber, whether it's Netflix, all these are running on Amazon, they're all running on platforms. And those in the software industry will definitely know. Earlier, they used to say a new release every year. Some would then say 6 months, once a month. Today, people like Amazon are actually doing a new thing every 11 or 12 seconds somewhere around the world. Onto their platform, they're making changes there. So very clearly, platforms are going to be a very major player as we go forward. And platforms must lead, actually these platforms must lead with humility, as new purchase and digital behaviors will almost certainly connect platforms over the longer term. You're actually going to see that companies will be deeply impacted by this crisis, will turn to platforms for their resilience, scale, cost effectiveness, enterprise services, and the audience that they cater to. Behavioral change after the pandemic would mean more opportunities for entrepreneurs to provide meaningful services. I just talked about those who've been successful in the past, who continue to be successful. But I'm sure that this crisis, you will see some of these logos not there 10 years from now. But you will see a lot of logos which came in the second half of 2020 being the big logos in 3 to 4 years from now. And I hope some of those come from places like Kerala and India. The next slide is on skilling and upskilling for success. Actually, the blended learning has taken on a completely new meaning. We are seeing a lot more focus on online learning today, not just on the school level, but also at higher levels where it is very much needed. In fact, you will find that if you have to survive, you have to be a continuous learner in not just the IT, in any field, you have to be continuously learning. So generally, we've always looked at it. When you talk to 5 CEOs, 4 of them will be telling you that their employees lack essential skills. They actually talked of 2019 as the year of skill gaps. All right, because that is a time when people all realized that there were big gaps in that. And it is not only the leadership's concern, actually tech illiteracy is more likely to make workforce redundant long before automation has the chance. So it is necessary for people to actually be current and continuously learning if they want to survive in tomorrow's world. It was required even in the last couple of years in yesterday's world, but in tomorrow's world, that is going to be very, very important, because any skill that you acquire actually becomes useless in 5 years. When I did my engineering, a lot of what I learned could be used for 10, 15, 20 years. No longer the case. What you learn today, irrespective of the field you are in, becomes redundant in less than a few years. So it is necessary for us, and I think every employer, and many of those on the call I'm sure are employers, need to ensure that you create opportunities for your employees to be continuously learning. I know, I'm again quoting TCS because I know the company well. The amount of focus that TCS has as knowledge management and learning is huge. And many of the companies in India today are doing that, because that is a success. Your success is not throwing away a guy who is not competent, but actually making people more competent to take on those jobs, because it is always better to use an existing employee because he understands the way you work, training them to do that. And that is something which is very good. So successfully invest in upskilling successfully. That is very important. Organizations would benefit greatly from first capitalizing on skills planning. Look at the skills planning, which is going to be a keystone of any strong upskilling program, by clearly presenting where the organization's workforce is currently in comparison to where the workforce has to go. And that is something which each of you, I think, should be doing. I must admit that it took weeks before accepting that a change has occurred. And current reality is not a nightmare, but indeed a reality. Okay, so very clearly, navigating through tough times like this, in this new age of disruption, is one great boon offered by Industry 4.0 technologies. When most of industries have slowed down due to economic recession induced by coronavirus, unsung heroes like robotic process automation companies are actually moving forward to offer recession-proof operations. So those who started working in those areas are those who are actually making an impact today. And you will find that it is successful implementation across various sectors during the COVID-19 that has embarked on the upsurge in its future demand, which is going to be undeniable, especially in the area of robot. More experts predict that an economic recession in the future will augment the global adoption of automation capabilities, including things like RPA. In fact, strategists at leading investment firms, Nobel laureates, all warn of an imminent global recession, okay, because there's a US $13 billion stockpile of negative yielding year or debt today, all right? That will change, but people are being prepared for that, okay, because many of the government bonds are trading at negative numbers, okay, which were at reasonable numbers today, and a lot of people who thought that there's going to be a safe harbor for investment are finding it difficult. But you will find that a lot of that will come out, and RPA will play a major role in that. So growing up with the potency of science and technology that had man visit the moon, transplant organs, create autonomous machines, etc., it couldn't have been imagined that a virus could bring the whole world down to a grinding halt. That too in a matter of a few weeks. Even the World War did not make it so fast, did not create the havoc so fast. At an abstract level, we can observe that industries and business models that were digital or had high adaptability to digitalization could circumnavigate the disruption and triumph over, while others that lack digital quotient are struggling or ceasing to be relevant. If we can say that economy and society got rebooted and will be more in digital form than in physical forever. So basically, there's going to be a big change. Digitalization is going to play a part there. The next slide is something which is very familiar, all of us would have seen. Kerala has shown that it's a state that has more to offer than tourism, and it should build on this. Actually, I think that we should not give up on that. And I would say that we need to think of new models there, see what can be done. People in that sector should be looking at it carefully, because the kind of employment it brings, the kind of impact it does on the economy is very high. So it is time for that sector to start looking within to see how do I ensure that I am able to not only survive, but grow completely out of this crisis. The next slide is something which I think many of us are familiar with, the IT sector. I'm sure that the world will have seen that Kerala is more than its beautiful beaches and the quiet products. The Indian IT sector, which survived the dot-com burst and the global economic crisis, is going through a crisis like never before. I don't think we've ever faced a crisis like this before. So that is something which is very, very important. And a lot of blood will flow, and many small and medium companies will be forced to shut down. A few large ones will be badly hit. The COVID-19 crisis has hit every country with whom we have been doing business, and has also hit us badly. The impact for this will last for several months, maybe 12 to 18 months if we get a control of things in a few weeks. If not, it can be a disaster. The Kerala IT industry itself is estimated to be between 20,000 to 25,000 crores per annum, and employs between 1.25 lakh to 1.75 lakh individuals. Unfortunately, neither the government nor industry associations have pakka data on this. But the loss due to the crisis as of end of April, I estimate to be between 3,000 to 5,000 crores. I've seen a government document which talks about 4,500 crores of loss, but I believe that as of end of April, it is going to be 3,000 to 5,000 crores, and may extend to 2 to 3 times that number if things do not get back to at least a certain level of normalcy by the end of May. What would this mean? Several companies with cash in hand may be forced, without cash in hand, may be forced to close down, like I mentioned earlier. Small and medium ones, I said, will need to have cash flows for a longer period of time. Many jobs will be lost. Many people will be asked to take salary cuts. But what is very important is that, and we should all realize, that every crisis opens up opportunities, and startups and every company should be looking out for these possibilities. Only those who think completely out of the box will see these and be able to seize these opportunities for the benefit of their organizations. Many of those who have to move out of companies as companies cut costs will probably be able to set up their own ventures and become job givers rather than job seekers. Ideas that improve communication and video communication capabilities will grow. The healthcare sector will grow, but will grow in a completely different way from what it has grown in the past. But the smartest ones will be the ones who see opportunities where the others have not gone before. And that is what you will see I talked about the logos earlier. The next slide is my last slide. And I would say the 5 Ds are going to be very important. Design to cost. Design the kind of money you're going to spend depending on the money that you have with you today. And like I said, 9 to 12 months you need to survive. So design how you're going to do it based on the cost which you will incur over the next 9 to 12 months. De-bottleneck. There could be there could be bottlenecks in your process. There could be bottlenecks in the number of people you have. There could be bottlenecks in the way you manufacture. There could be bottlenecks in the way you develop. There are bottlenecks in the way you do business. You have to de-bottleneck to become more efficient. You have to decentralize. Like I talked about earlier, trust your people. Trust them, give them responsibility, make them accountable for that. You have to de-risk your business. Just like we are all de-risking ourselves by staying at home today, you have to de-risk your business and the livelihoods of your employees. And the 5th D is digitize. I believe digitization is going to be one of the biggest solutions for the problems that we are facing today. Thank you very much. I am now open for questions. The next slide is, of course, thank you slide. Can you put that on? Because it says, stay at home, stay safe. So I'm open to questions now.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for that quite insightful session. I should also say it was quite inspiring too. And let us believe, as you said, let us believe that the pandemic will have a positive impact on the companies. With that, we open up for questions.
My name is Vincent Chitlapalli, and I work as Vice President of Engineering here in Nielsen, Kochi. So the question is, how Kerala government or how the other bodies around the government is helping people to actually come up with some disruptive ideas, how we are actually supporting them to be successful. Probably we can take some of these things into the very international level. Otherwise, it will definitely benefit our lives here. So what are the things that we are doing?
Yeah, a couple of things. Look, one is, look, don't expect government to do anything much. All right. Because very clearly, I think government does not have either the time or the resources, okay, or the expertise to do what we are expecting them to do. Okay, so very clearly, don't expect government to do anything at this point of time. Number two, if you're going to expect government to advise you, you're going to the wrong person for advice. I think what government needs to do, and what is important there, is for government to actually very clearly ensure that there is a freedom to do business that is available. If government can just allow industrialists the freedom to do business without hindrance and without botheration from the government representatives, where they are on the political side or on the bureaucratic side, I think it will be a big change. And that is what I think we should be asking for. Don't ask for money, they will not be able to give it. You can ask them for a deferment, it might happen. But actually what is going to be important is what each of us look at. I think each of us know our businesses better than anyone else does. And look at what is it that I'm going to do completely differently in the way forward in this business. And that is what I think is going to be important. So how my business, how your business, each of these businesses grow and will change is going to be dependent on, it has to come from within. I don't think you can have an expert from outside come and tell you how to do that. You can probably help somebody to facilitate that process. But otherwise, it is going to be each one of you who know your businesses well to see how your business is going to be different and how are you going to get over this. Like I said, many businesses will have a problem because of the change that is happening. But I see in every business an opportunity which is there, which you have to seize. And that is what is going to be important. Seizing those opportunities is what is going to make a big difference for each of us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vincent. Next, we have Mr. Shine Anthony. Shine, please go ahead.
My question is that whether the state as well as the central government had failed in the concept of this stay home and be safe concept. They are saying it's from the last 40 plus days, and whether they should have moved back and ask the people to live with it and open up the economy and the business sector so that the country
you're asking a very medical question. Either you become a Trump or you become a Modi. Which one is for each of these countries to decide on? But the fact of the matter is, look, at least in Kerala it has worked. Okay, it has worked well, and that 1.5 months of pain which a lot of us went through, I think if we are continuing to be careful, things will work out. All right, but very clearly there are various thoughts in this. There are people who keep saying that, well, we were overpopulated, so let some people die. There are others who say that, the herd immunity will come up. But at the end of the day, you have to go by the way your government in the country in which you operate decides for you to do, and try to make the best out of it. Because I don't think there is any point trying for us to try and complain about it or try to make a change there. At times like this, you follow what your government says, whether it's right or wrong. You don't have an option. You're not in government. Otherwise, smart people like all of you all should actually have stood for elections to parliament, gone there, and then started ruling the country. Okay. So one thing is, look, we can't really blame them for what they are doing it based on advice which many people are giving them. But frankly speaking, I think the way we have done it in India and in Kerala is probably the best that we could have done with the kind of environment and the kind of circumstances that we were in. So I wouldn't blame either the central government or the state have taken. And we have done much better than many countries around the world. UK tried the model that you said, and then they changed from that completely, but it was too late for them. Okay, I know people in the UK who actually tested to be corona positive, and that the hospital tells them, if you have a breathing problem and you think you're going to die, call us, we'll send the ambulance, otherwise stay at home. It is safer to be at home. You have people in the US who couldn't even get tested and have died, and then they later on find that the person died out of corona. So very clearly, we are much better. In Kerala, before you can use the word COR in the corona, If they think there is something, they already take you to hospital or you're in quarantine, and then they test you after that. So very clearly, this is going to be very, very critical and very, very important for each of us. So we will need to be sure about what is being done, and we have to follow the governments in the way we do things.
Thank you, sir. Next, I have a question from Mr. N.S. Nambudiri. So he's asking, what is the future of startups in hygiene products in Kerala?
Look, hygiene products are going to be very important. A lot of people who are not in hygiene products have already started doing it. If you look at the companies who've come out with your sanitizers, they were never doing sanitizers before. So the opportunity on that is going to be huge, because very clearly washing hands, using these sanitizers, using masks, using things to ensure that your lifts in your apartment blocks or the floors are cleaned well is going to be very common now, and it will continue for a long time. It's become a way of life. So hygiene products will definitely have an impact.
We have another question from Mr. Sajid Menon. I request Sajid Menon to please ask the question.
Up until the mid-70s, China was always viewed with suspicion until Chairman Mao redefined the Chinese economy. And China became a leader because of scale of operations. They became the cheapest producer.
Yeah.
When we say that in the current situation, China is once again being looked at with some level of suspicion, and that countries like India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, whichever else, have an opportunity.
Yeah.
Ultimately, will economic reality and the intensity of competition not prevail? And will the global economy not start looking at China again? Because for one thing, they have built up a very strong control over raw materials, natural raw materials, particularly investing in countries like Africa and so on. So over time, maybe sooner than later, will it not come back to where it is now?
It could. But so let us look at the late 70s, early 80s. Okay, the Hero pen, which was coming from China, actually those who are older would remember, was actually considered to be a cheap pen. All right, but at that time, the Japanese pilot pen was supposed to be much better. There was a time before that when the Japanese stuff was considered to be copied from the West. All right, so this cycle has gone on, except that China, like you said, actually planned have a control over the entire supply chain. That is what made a difference for them compared to the Japanese. But the Koreans are doing the same now. Okay, the Koreans are actually trying to replicate a lot of the success of China did. So, but one of the things which is going to happen is because of this period of distrust which is there. It's not just distrust. In a way, it is actually enforced. It is enforced by America, which started well before the COVID-19. It is now going to be even more because people will want to ensure that there are alternate supply sources in case of calamity happening. So you will find that there will be many other countries who will get into this game, whether it be Vietnam or it be India. But remember, the Chinese are smart guys, okay? You know what they have done now? They've actually set up Chinese industrial estates. They've set up Chinese industrial estates in Taiwan and places like that. Sorry, not in Taiwan, in Africa. They've looked at the Oman area and things like that, and they have set up Sino-Omani industry. They looked at African spaces which are going to be there. So there are a lot of such things which they are also doing. They're creating their Silk Route, the road route which they have. So they'll actually try and do that. They will use the countries which are closer to them to actually have an impact in these areas.
I just wanted to know, what is the possibility or what is the probability of more companies shifting to India? And it is generally said that the supply chain management is pretty strong in China. And that is one reason that companies are not willing to move back to other locations. So what is your take on that, sir?
So let me give you about 1.5 to 2 years ago, I had visited Shanghai and Beijing. And I had met, we have a good robotics company out of Cochin, okay? I had met them just before that at the TAI conference. And then when I was there, I had visited 2 companies which do work in robotics. If one of our guys want to have a prototype done or a small part done, it will take them a few weeks. The guy in China is able to get his prototype the next day. Okay. So the thing is that it will need a lot of ancillary support. All right. But it's a clear question of a chicken and egg kind of a thing. What comes first? But my belief is that the moment you see more manufacturing coming up, you will find that the support for that and the supply chain kind of a thing we are talking about will become better. What is going to be very important is for us to actually have clear up our ports, make them faster, clear up our roads, make the transportation faster, clear up our process at airports, make it faster. And I would say things will completely change and will become for the better.
Thank you, sir. We have one last question from Mr. Ramchandra Menon. So he's from the event management industry. So he's asking, what is the future of social events and other events in general?
Well, I should tell you, many of you would have heard of the Singularity University.
Yeah.
The Singularity University actually, and I don't know how many of you heard about Ismail Slim, Salim Ismail, who wrote the book on exponential organizations, okay? So Singularity University actually conducts a conference every year. And they have a few hundred people who go for that. It costs about $15,000 to attend. The same guys who did that did a virtual conference recently. It cost about $1,000 for those in the US to attend. But in India, some of us got together, negotiated a big deal. And we got it for less than 10,000 rupees per person. So very clearly, events, you will need to look at virtual events coming up. Because remember that the event is not, one of the problems that we've all had is we think the event can only be in a hotel or a ground with a big stage and things like that. No. Coordinating and organizing an event is going to be very, very critical, especially in the virtual world. People will need people who specialize on that, which means, again, I talked to you about the digitization, the technology there is going to be important. In this conference, we actually had opportunities for networking. You could go into the networking area, and the moment you are there, you will randomly, just like you would in a coffee break, you would actually get to meet somebody and say, hello, who are you, what it is. You had 3 minutes with each person. And at the end of 3 minutes, you were disconnected and you got to meet somebody else. You had separate discussion rooms that were there, where you could actually have a separate discussion which was there. You could call for a discussion of people, like-minded people, and have that. So technology is playing a big change there, one. The second thing is, I don't think the kind of living that we've had in the 2 months is going to continue forever. You will still see events which will be there, which will need a physical presence. Because it is impossible to do a virtual event on something where I have to feel what it is. Okay? So you will still find them happening. But they will take some time to come back. I believe that in about 8 to 9 months, you will see some of them slowly picking up. Even before that, it will pick up. But for you, if you're a good event manager, you should start looking at virtual events and take it forward from there. So
thank you, sir. I think we will conclude for the day. Good. And you've just crossed 12. So,
yeah, so thank you very much. I mean, before you do the formal thanks, thank you very much. Interesting questions. I hope I have been able to stir some thoughts in those of you who are part of this session. And I see about 60 plus people on it at this point. So I hope it's there, but very clearly, I keep writing about some of these in my Facebook once in a while, but sometimes I write about all kinds of things. So, but on business once in a while, but clearly there is an opportunity that is there for us, and it is up to us to seize those opportunities. If you don't seize this, you will regret it. And don't wait for this to be over. You have to start planning if you've already not started planning for the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Indo-American Chamber and the World Trade Center for inviting me to this session. Thank you very much.